Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee. Today is Wednesday, November 10th. As always, I'm your host, Josh Newberg, and we have another crazy weekend of college football ahead. Big visits are here, and these are the final face-to-face meetings that recruits have with some of these programs. Remember, there are no more in-home visits after the season. We used to see the season end, and then there'd be 2 to 3 weeks, call it 2 to 3 weeks of in-home visits where the coaches get to come in, sit in your living room, and convince you that maybe if we had a bad season, what you saw on the field doesn't matter. Well, now those are gone. Signing day is 4 days after the season ends, so these games could be the difference between a recruit coming to your school or going elsewhere. You lose. Wins and losses in recruiting, we used to say, oh, well, they don't really matter too much. That was because of those in-home visits after the season. But now, this is the last time you might see these recruits face-to-face. You win, there's a locker room celebration. You might grab food with some of the players after. The city is just different after a win. You lose, everybody basically gets in their car and goes home. So, final impressions make a big difference, and the visits that we have lined up over the next 3 weeks are very important. All right, just had to say that. We got a big show, lots to cover. It's going to be a great one here on the Inside Scoop, but before we get going, guys, do me a favor, hit subscribe. Look at this. We're almost to 100K. I don't even know how that happened. The season went by so fast, and we are almost to 100K, so help us get there. All right, today's show, we got a lot to cover. We're going to talk Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, USC, and Oregon. Let's get to it. We're talking Alabama because the Tide, they took care of business last weekend at home against LSU. But this weekend, Oklahoma comes to town, another big-time SEC matchup. And we're only 3 weeks until signing day, so we're going to have Andrew Bone on this video to break down what's going on with Alabama recruiting. But before we do that, Tide fans, do me a favor, hit subscribe. These are important times to be subscribed to the Rivals Recruits channel. All right. Let's bring in Andrew Bone with Bama Online. Now, let's start with we're going to get into the big visit weekend and everything that Alabama has going on, but are there any Alabama commitments taking trips to other programs that fans need to be aware of down the stretch?
Yeah, I mean, we have seen a few guys that have taken visits this year. Yeah, Nolan Wilson was the kid, the top 100 defensive lineman that visited Auburn a few weeks ago, and he was also at Miami earlier this season. But not really concerned with Nolan. He's been to most all of Alabama's home games this season, and it seems to be very solid with his commitment. I talked to one of his coaches who said that he was not concerned with Alabama's position, that he was just basically going to some of these games to see some of his old teammates play and support some of the recruits from their school. Bear Fretwell, spoke with him last night, offensive lineman from Georgia, previously committed to Georgia Tech and was in Atlanta a couple weeks ago for Georgia Tech's game during Alabama's bye week. So kind of caught a lot of people off guard, not Alabama because he had informed Alabama beforehand, but I would say coming off of his official visit with Alabama the previous week, had said that things were shut down, but then ends up over at Georgia Tech. So I asked him about that, and he said, I was committed to Georgia Tech for a long time. They were the first school to believe in me. They had a great season this year. They've been asking me to come up just to watch them play one weekend, so I decided to go up there. I had a good time, but they know where I'm going. I know where I'm going, and that's Alabama. And he was in Tuscaloosa this past weekend. It's going to be at Alabama's next 2 home games against Oklahoma and again against Eastern Illinois next weekend. So not really concerned about Bear Fretwell either. Most of these other guys in Alabama's class have said that they're very solid. Things are shut down. I think the one player that we have seen take a recent visit that a lot of people have been questioning because he's been very quiet. He hadn't really talked a lot. Hadn't done any interviews throughout the season. That's J.J. Finch out of Indianapolis, who went over to Tennessee a few weekends ago. Kind of an unexpected trip. He had said he wasn't sure he was going to take any more visits, never really announced anything, but ends up going down to Knoxville. And Tennessee was number 2 on his list when he committed to Alabama during the summer. So that was one thing that we were really intrigued to kind of find out, was how involved was Tennessee still, how high were they still being considered by J.J. Finch. And he even came out after that visit and said that they were high, that he was still considering them, but from this past weekend, he was in Tuscaloosa for the LSU game. It was his first trip back to Tuscaloosa since June. There had been some talk about him going up to Ohio State this weekend for a visit because they had still been pushing to get him on campus. But doesn't seem like he's going to go over to Ohio State. Seems like he's very solid with Alabama still. I'm sure Tennessee's still going to try to push for him late in the process. But 3 weeks left. I feel Alabama's in a pretty good spot there. I think the one other guy that we're going to be paying attention to is Brian Williams. Been a commitment to Alabama since June. Was a spring offer for Alabama. Took a trip to Tuscaloosa for the Tennessee game, but it's been very quiet. I think he showed up at USF the other day. Alabama's got a couple other wide receiver commitments in its class, including five-star Cedarian Morgan, Owen Cabell from Nashville, and they just hosted Michigan State wide receiver commit Samson Gash this past weekend for an official visit, and one of the fastest players in the country. And that's certainly somebody that they are pushing to get in their class, and somebody that we're certainly paying very close attention to right now. So would not be shocked if we saw Brian Williams end up going somewhere else, but as of right now, still on the Alabama commitment list.
You mentioned wide receiver Samson Gash on campus. He's Michigan State commitment. Kind of feel good about him, all the things he had to say. He had goosebumps when he was in the stadium. It sounds like it's only a matter of time until this flip happens. Any other flip targets with 3 weeks to go?
Yeah, not really. I think a lot of people are just waiting to hear who's going to be that other name that ends up popping up the last couple of days in the recruiting cycle. And this year, it doesn't seem like there's really anybody else that's out there. I think Alabama's pretty comfortable with its current class. They also know that they're going to have to go and get guys in the portal because they're going to have some big losses from their team this year. Guys that are seniors, guys that are going to be moving on in important positions. Whether that's something they're going to lose 3 senior linebackers. They're going to lose some guys on the defensive front. So offensive line. These are going to be some areas that I think Alabama is certainly going to be looking at. So they really can't go out and spend a lot more in the high school ranks right now. They're going to have to save some of that for the transfer portal period here coming up on January the 2nd. So I think Samson Gash is probably that last guy that we're really kind of following as far as guys that they want to try to flip and really bring into their class between now and the early signing period.
All right. So when it comes to visitors this weekend, the focus has to be on 2027. I mean, across the country, it's all about where are the top 2027 names heading. Who are some of the headliners you're expecting in Tuscaloosa this weekend? Inside Scoop listeners, let's talk game time because the NFL season is underway. College football rivalry season is here. And who doesn't love to see their favorite NFL or college team live and in person, especially when you can go with a group of your buddies. But tickets aren't always going to be easy to find, and getting deals on those last-minute tickets can be frustrating when all you want is to be there the moment your team runs out onto the field. Well, thankfully, the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing ticket experiences, and it only takes a few simple clicks. The app, it's easy to use, and the Game Time guarantee means that you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, fees are always included, so what you see is what you pay. You can even get into an NFL game as low as $100. That's why I use the Game Time app. It's super simple, and it makes the experience of buying great seats a breeze. Also, one of the coolest features I've seen is the Game Time lowest price guarantee. So Game Time will credit you 100% of the difference to guarantee you're getting the lowest price if you can find cheaper tickets elsewhere. All right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code INSIDESCOOP. That's promo code INSIDESCOOP for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Promo code INSIDESCOOP for $20 off Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Yeah, so I would say last weekend was the weekend that really was beyond impressive, the amount of 5-star recruits that were on campus in the 27 class. I mean, it just seemed like a who's who among the best prospects
Were
in
you
that
surprised that
junior
Kennedy
class.
Brown showed up?
A little bit because he wasn't on the initial list. I mean, we saw
Right.
Maxwell Hiller on campus, Ishmael Kamara. We saw Albert Simeon. These are three, five-star caliber guys that were all on campus in that 27 class, and then Kennedy Brown shows up, kind of at the last minute. We didn't know he was coming until Friday. We'd confirmed all the other guys, so it was a really good offensive line front. They were all in Tuscaloosa. In addition to guys like Elijah Haven, DJ Jacobs, Zyron Forstall, Anthony Sweeney. I mean, it was absolutely loaded this past weekend. One guy that's coming in this week that was actually supposed to be in last weekend, who's another top elite offensive lineman, is Jake Hildebrand out of Arizona. He's a guy that Alabama offered several months ago. They've really pushed hard for him. Maxwell Hiller, basically as of right now has Alabama at the top of his list. I think Steve Wiltfong even put in a prediction for Hiller to Alabama. But one of the guys that we consistently heard about since back in the spring with Hiller's name is Jake Hildebrand, a guy that it seems really high on Alabama. I think he's been to Tuscaloosa a couple times now, so this will be his third visit. So really intrigued to kind of see how his weekend goes in T-Town. One other guy that I'll mention, we'll have a complete list of all the visitors on BOL. Already have that up on our on the roundtable on our premium message board. But one guy that I am really intrigued to see is Kellen Hall, the number one defensive lineman in the 28 class. So just a sophomore, still has a long way to go, but he's going to be making a trip to Alabama this weekend. He was actually supposed to be on campus last weekend, but ended up having to push it to this week out of the Louisville area. So that's a guy that I'm really intrigued to kind of see how his weekend goes, because obviously defensive lineman is a premium position. It's a position that I think Alabama fans, and I'm sure fans around the country, but especially Alabama fans on our message board, are constantly asking about who's going to be that next defensive line commit for Alabama. Who are they going after? Alabama has 5 defensive linemen in the 26th class right now, and they're still asking, who's out there, who's left out there on the defensive front. So still a few years away, but Kellen Hall, definitely a big name that's going to be on campus this weekend.
All right, Bama fans, another big recruiting weekend in Tuscaloosa. How you guys feeling about the season? How you feeling about recruiting? And who do you think is going to be the next defensive line commitment? Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk some Georgia recruiting, because we have an epic showdown in Athens this weekend, and it's also in prime time, which means plenty of time to get recruits in that stadium, and it is going to be a huge weekend for recruiting. We got a special UGA expert in studio with us to break down this huge weekend. But before we get started, Georgia fans, do me a favor. We got 3 weeks of signing day. Hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. You're going to want to be locked in. All right. We got Rusty Menzel from Dogs HQ. Rusty, we've been talking about this weekend since the summer. Who are the headliners that Georgia fans should expect in this weekend?
Well, it starts with a big man. And you start talking about 6'8", 315-pound, 2027 offensive tackle Joshua Salmon Pelly out of Douglas County High School. This is a kid that recently announced his top 10. I really like where Georgia is right now. But you look at the 27 class, obviously DJ Jacobs out of Blessed Trinity High School. It's a 5-star. Many think maybe the top defensive end or the second-rated defensive end in the country for his class. He's been at Georgia a lot. Obviously know the connection with his dad playing at Georgia. A lot of schools, Clemson, Tennessee, Alabama, everybody's in on him. But he'll be back in Athens this weekend. A pair of quarterbacks as well, Josh, when you look at Colton Nussmeier, the 2027 quarterback out of Texas. Obviously, older brother Garrett, dad coaches football as well. This is a name that a lot of people are familiar with. But I think the one you're going to watch is in the 2028 class with an upcoming decision. Jaden Wade out of IMG Academy is a 2028 quarterback. He's going to make his decision early next week. It's crazy. It's a 2028 prospect. And it is early, but a player like that, his caliber, you take that commitment and see if you can hold on if Georgia can land him.
Yeah, and it's at the quarterback position, so that kind of, they do come off the board kind of early. So listening to you talk about headliners, there's a lot of 2027 talk.
Yep.
And that's not just at Georgia. That's really across the country. So since we're only 3 weeks to signing today, I want to still talk 2026.
Gotcha.
What's left for Georgia? I mean, I know they got a great class lined up, and if it finished this way, Georgia fans should be plenty happy. But if they could, where would they add a flip or two?
Well, I think you look at offensive linemen. They're looking at a young man, Tyreek Jemison, out of Paulding County High School. This kid, he decommitted from Kentucky recently as an in-state offensive lineman. Georgia offered him a couple of weeks ago. Got a chance to see him up close, and Georgia offensive line coach Stacy Searles went by during one of the bye weeks and saw him. Really, Josh, it's just holding on to your class. I mean, at this point, just about all the commits are expected in town this weekend. You're going to have Jared Curtis, still some rumblings there with him, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But, it's really holding on to your class and what you can add because, when you got a class like this, you've had these guys this long, you don't want to lose pieces at the end.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, that being said, it seems like NIL, we're 3 weeks away and anything could happen. But, talking to the insiders, just talking to people behind the scenes, it sounds like NIL might have things a little, together more on these commit lists, not as many flips down the stretch. We'll see what actually happens. So if there was anybody on this Georgia commit list that UGA fans need to worry about, who would you point to?
Well, I don't know if you worry, but obviously there's a lot of tension on Jared Curtis. When a couple of weeks ago with all the Vanderbilt talk, it's a kid, right out of Nashville with the momentum that Vanderbilt has. This is what I've said. His family said he's staying with Georgia. He has said he's staying with Georgia. His agent has said they felt like Georgia's the place for him. But this is one of those players. I mean, he's the number one quarterback in the country for most people. Most people that do those types of rankings, and you don't get those easy sometimes. So I don't know if you necessarily worry, but you do pay attention all the way to the end. He's going to be in Athens this weekend, and that's good quality time again for Georgia to spend time with him. I think he came down for the Alabama weekend. He's trying to finish up his senior season there at Nashville Christian. But, I don't necessarily say – will there be some changes in their commit list? I would bet there will be. You know what I mean? I don't know who else is going to be there. Also, Josh, you start thinking about the late coaching changes. Yeah. That's going to impact. Who's going to be free? Who's going to be like, okay, I was committed to that school, but that coach is no longer there. And does Georgia try to make some movement there along with other schools? So the classes are done. But when you start talking about that last weekend in November, man, with all these coaches getting named, it could get things real interesting real quick.
Yeah, because the recruits don't have a ton of time to see what's going to happen.
It's the Wednesday after that, which is crazy.
The season ends on Saturday, and 4 days later, that Wednesday is signing day. So if you're if you're a commit of the Florida Gators, the LSU Tigers, somebody that doesn't have a head coach right now, what are the odds they're even going to have a head coach at that time? And if they don't, do you just stick to that school because that's where you're committed to, or do you go look for another spot? So it's all unprecedented. We haven't seen a December 3rd signing day yet, and we're going to see what happens. There could be some fallout. There could be not. All right. Let's talk about why you are here in Nashville. It's not just to see me. You are in town to see quarterback Jared Curtis this Friday night. He's been lighting it up this senior season. How's he been playing? Well, he's been playing great, but what do you think of what to expect from him? Because he's going to be on campus. He's an early enrollee, right? So he's going to be on campus in like 2.5 months.
Probably some point,
sooner than that.
Yeah, at some point in December. So next month he'll be in Athens practicing, hopefully for some playoff games with Georgia. But listen, you look at the level of competition, and I think you don't dance around that. Nashville Christian's in a smaller private school classification here in Tennessee, but you look at the two best teams they played, specifically that Ensworth game, and you see the plays he made against a team. They were outmanned. There's no question. But he was the talent equalizer. And I think you've seen some of these crazy throws he's made and some of the athleticism. But to me, you take the two best teams they were going to play all year, regardless of playoffs or whatever, and Jared Curtis was the difference. And that's what you want to see out of a player like that. You can only measure him by what you've seen on tape. And the two best teams he's played up here might be the two best teams he's played in his entire career there. He played two of his best games, Josh. And everybody I talked to, even our Charles Powers at the Ensworth game, and he said, Rusty, that was crazy. It's interesting. The comparison's always been Matt Stafford. But as this year's went on, you start to see more of the Josh Allen comparisons. I mean, this is a 225-pound kid, broad shoulder, can make the throws, but he can move. A lot of people are starting to understand how he can hurt you with his legs, and that's so dynamic in today's game. I think Georgia fans are going to be really excited when he gets to town.
All right, last question. How are we feeling about the game? The actual game against Texas. You think Georgia's got a shot here, Rusty?
Well, the Kirby speak of the week was, I heard him quote and say, this Georgia team hasn't beaten Texas ever. Last year's team beat them twice, but this team hasn't. And that's true. But listen, I kind of like the matchup for Georgia. I think Texas is really good. I think they're very dangerous. I think Arch Manning is getting better. This is what I've said about Arch Manning the entire time. He was going to see a lot of different things he's never seen. He's gotten better as the year went on, and that's what I thought. That's what I said in the preseason. I think Sark's a great offensive coach, but I think Saturday night between the hedges in Athens will be something he hasn't seen yet either. It's going to be next level in there. We'll see how he handles that, because I can promise you, with that much time to get lathered up, that much time to get ready to roll, Sanford Stadium is going to be ready. That place will be rocking Saturday night. We'll see how he handles it. I have predicted Georgia. I'm staying with that. I do think it's going to be a 4-quarter, very physical football game, and it might come down. Georgia fans are going to have their nerves shot again, but it might come down to something very late, a turnover, a stop, who can make that last play in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, on paper, it looked like heading into the season, Texas had one of maybe the best roster in college football. Didn't start the season like that. They've been playing better, but you know what? So has Georgia. Georgia's been playing a lot better as the season wore on, too. I like where the Bulldogs sit in this one, but let's hear it from you guys. Get in the comment section. How you guys feeling about the Dogs' chances on Saturday? Give us your score predictions. Comment section below. Let's talk some Michigan recruiting, because we have 3 weeks until the early signing day, and in this video, we're going to talk flip targets. We got EJ Holland here with the Wolverine, and we want to know, who is Michigan chasing with just 3 weeks left until signing day? We're going to break it all down, but first, Michigan fans, do me a favor. Exciting times. Hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. All right. Yesterday, Caden Catchings flipped his commitment from USF. The linebacker had been trending that direction for a while. Now Michigan has him, and they want more. But, EJ, before we talk about flip targets, let's talk about Julian Walker. He's been committed to Michigan for a while, but he's still looking around. What do you think the status is with Julian Walker and the Wolverines as we head down the stretch?
It's interesting. Julian Walker, he's a South Carolina kid by way of the Midwest. His family's originally from the Midwest, so they're very familiar with the Michigan program, what the weather's like, distance, all that. But he does play for Dutch Fork, which is a powerhouse in South Carolina. His father is on the strength staff at South Carolina. So, that's something that we're monitoring closely, just having that familial tie as well as the proximity to the university. His mom has never visited Michigan before, and I think that's a big thing for the Wolverines, is getting her on campus. She didn't make it to the summer official visit when Walker committed, so she is going to attend the game against Ohio State later this month, and that'll be Walker's first visit to Michigan since that official visit in the summer. In between time, he's made several visits to South Carolina. I know it's close by and his dad's on the strength staff, but still a little worrisome, because one of those visits was unofficial visit, which was very interesting. And like I said, I still think Michigan needs to win over his mother as well. I think South Carolina is a legitimate threat. And I think Michigan knew that when they landed his commitment in the summer. They knew they were going to have to fight for him to the final whistle. And Michigan defensive line coach Lou Esposito, he's poured a lot of resources into this recruitment. He's done a great job of building that relationship. He was actually on the road during the bye week last week and visited with Walker on Thursday. And I think that meeting went really, really well. But they know that South Carolina is always going to be lurking around and is going to be a threat until signing day. They have a backup option just in case. They have been monitoring Charlie Gillick, who is committed to Minnesota. He's an in-state athlete who could find his way into the class as an athlete, to be completely honest. He is listed as a tight end, but Michigan evaluating him as an edge, could play multiple positions. Anyway, he's the plan, B, I guess you could say, if Walker does flip, but they are all in on keeping Walker and hitting a home run when he visits for the Ohio State game.
All right, well, sounds like they have a plan. If Julian Walker is to go elsewhere, they have a plan. So we'll see what happens. Now, as we sit here, we're just 3 weeks from signing day. Literally 3 weeks from today will be National Signing Day, the early signing period, which is really the only signing period. So are there any flips down the stretch that could compare to the Bryce Underwood flip of a year ago, almost to this date?
No, I don't think so, man. Like that's once in
Generation.
yeah, I was gonna say a generational flip. They call Bryce Underwood a generational talent. That's a
Yeah,
generational flip.
it was.
Yeah, Michigan wants to take around 27, maybe 28 this recruiting cycle. Really, the two positions that the focus is in on is offensive line and cornerback, and
Yeah.
offensive line specifically center, where they have two targets, Adrian Hamilton and Sean Stover. Hamilton being a Virginia Tech commit, Stover being a Duke commit. Michigan will get one, in my opinion. We don't know which one yet. Stover's already made an OV. Hamilton is set to make an OV later this month. At corner, I think that's where you find the more high-profile names. Haven Finney, top 100 cornerback, committed to LSU. Michigan's still very much in contact on a regular basis with Brian Kelly being shown the door. The opportunity is there for Michigan to really make a move, but they have to get him in for an OV. And the same thing goes with CJ Bronaugh, who's a Rivals 300 corner committed to Florida. He's making an official visit to Ohio State this weekend, but Michigan's also trying to get him on campus as well, and they've been in frequent contact. Baylor commit, Jamarion Vincent, another Rivals 300 cornerback. He already made a visit to Michigan. He's still weighing his options. Texas has become more involved in that recruitment, which is something to watch. He's a Waco kid, so he lives literally minutes away from Baylor's campus. So I think it'll be tough to pull him, but the fact is he's the only flip corner target that has visited. And Michigan secondary coach Lamar Morgan is from Central Texas, so he's from the area. He can relate to him and all that good stuff. But those are probably the three big names on the corner board right now. Maybe another one will pop up. Maybe a surprise will pop up. And I said 27, maybe 28. Michigan could take a flyer on an in-stater. They don't have an in-state recruit committed this cycle, which is interesting. So I think, like I mentioned, Charlie Gillick could find his way into the class as an athlete, but keep an eye at quarterback. Josh, I didn't tell you pre-show to get your reaction here, but Tommy Carr, brother of Notre Dame quarterback CJ Carr, could be one to watch. I wrote about him a few weeks ago. He's committed to Miami of Ohio, having a really impressive senior season. Things kind of fell through in a weird way with CJ Carr, but Tommy Carr could be an interesting late add to Michigan's class. Remember, Brady Smeagol, Michigan's current quarterback commit, had an ACL injury.
Yeah.
He's out for the year. The quarterback depth behind Bryce Underwood is not there. So I think adding a late quarterback could be in the cards. Michigan's done it before. They did it with Chase Herbstreit, who was kind of came out of nowhere, really. Dan Villari many cycles ago was also a late addition that came out of nowhere. So Michigan's done it at the quarterback position where they kind of take a late flyer on a guy. I think Tommy Carr is one to watch for sure.
Hey, they took a late flyer on a guy named Bryce Underwood too. All that you need is a shot. Just give him a chance. We'll see what happens. So, Michigan fans, it's going to be an exciting run to signing day. I feel like Michigan is in position to make a couple moves. So talk to EJ and I. How do you feel about this 2026 class, and what do you want to see Michigan accomplish on the recruiting trail between now and National Signing Day? Only 3 weeks to go. Talk to us, comment section below. We're talking USC recruiting as the Trojans have the #1 class in 2026, and there's only 3 more weeks until the early signing period. So Trojans are also, though, right now, at the same time as having a #1 class in 2026, they are gearing up to make a run at the #1 class in 2027 as well. And this weekend versus Iowa, there are some big-time targets on campus. We're going to break it down with Adam Gorney. But, guys, before I do that, USC fans, do me a favor, hit subscribe. 3 weeks till signing day. This is why you are here, for moments like this. Hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. All right, let's bring in Adam Gorney, West Coast analyst, and some big-time 2027 names on campus. Wide receiver Quentin Hale, wide receiver Jaden Upshaw, wide receiver Damani Warren, linebacker Caden Henderson, corner Josiah Molden. Those are just a few of the big names. Why should USC fans be excited about this group?
Yeah, it's very interesting because Lincoln Riley has sort of put his foot down this week and said, get to the Coliseum, get it loud. This is a massive game. And he really doesn't do that as much, but they're really putting this Iowa game on the map as a huge one for them, probably because they think they could probably out-athletic them and win the game pretty big in front of some good wide receiver recruits. Quentin Hale goes to school 6 miles from USC's campus. He's been loved up by that coaching staff from day one. They absolutely love him and think he's one of the best receivers in the country. It's going to be a USC-Alabama battle for him down the stretch. He loves both programs, but I think USC still has an edge for him. Jaden Upshaw is interesting. He's going to be coming in from Georgia. He's got all the Southeast schools, the Texas schools involved. But a lot of those kids, especially in years past, as we've seen, have come out to LA and absolutely fallen in love with it. See if you can kind of hold on to him if you get an early commitment. And then Damani Warren is a kid who plays in Las Vegas, but he's originally from South Central LA, right down the street from USC's campus. Again, Oregon is going to be very involved with him for a very long time. He's kind of the guy that fits the mold of what Lincoln Riley loves, those big wide receiver, flex tight end types. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what they're going to sell on him this time around as well. And then there are going to be many, many other targets on campus as well. Josiah Molden probably is a long shot for USC as Oregon and Ohio State battle it, but you can never count them out, especially if they have a great weekend down here in LA.
Yeah, that's the reason why you get them on campus, especially mid-November in LA versus mid-November in Columbus. Are you kidding me? So Let's see how these visits go. We're going to be talking USC recruiting all week coming out of this one. Not including the weekend visitors, but who else do you feel right now as USC makes their run? Who else are they in great shape for in 2027?
Yeah, I think defensive back is where you start, and there is an enormity of names that you can start with. They're probably only going to take 4, 5 max, but it's going to be interesting. You start with Duvet Williams. He's taking visits all across the country. He's going to go to Indiana this weekend, so that's going to be interesting. He's been other places, but I still think USC is pretty much, I don't want to say a lock, but pretty close to a lock for him. Honor Olave Johnson, USC is right at the top of his recruitment. He grew up loving Reggie Bush. And so when you're from San Diego, you have a lot of family in the area, and you grew up loving Reggie Bush, I think USC sits pretty for him. Gavin Williams, they're working on flipping Dante Wright. They never really got it going with Juju Johnson at Long Beach Poly, Dante Wright's teammate, so we'll see how that goes. And then the two interesting ones are Danny Lang and J.O. Washington, Aaron Washington at Mater Dei. Mm-hmm. Ohio State is probably at the top for both, but I just don't think, USC is going to let them out super easy. So I think, if they go to 6 just to flex some muscle and keep some kids home, it'll be interesting. But there are plenty of names that they could go for at defensive back.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Right now in 2026, USC has 35 commitments. For 2027, they have 0. So we'll see what happens. It could change. I'm not saying there's any cause for concern at all. I'm just saying there's 0 commitment. So the slate is completely clean for 2027. Yeah. Maybe we'll have a couple coming out of this weekend. Now, turn our attention back to 2026 for a second, because as I said, signing day just 3 weeks away, and we got some big news. Edge Luke Wafel returns to campus this weekend. There's been some buzz that Ohio State might circle back, make another run at Luke Wafel, which, why shouldn't they? He's one of the best players in America. Ohio State wouldn't be doing their job if they weren't making a final push for him. But seeing him out west this weekend, it seems like I'll just ask, is it going to be a quiet signing day for USC?
Yeah. This could go on ice cold takes or whatever that site is called after this, but I actually think I think it actually is going to be. And I think the storyline of last recruiting cycle was all the flips. I think the storyline of this recruiting cycle is a lot of swings and misses from other schools for USC commits. And, people went after Mark Bowman, not a lot of interest. People went after Keeney Pepe, not a lot of interest. Elbert Hill is, grew up watching Ohio State, and he's sticking. Luke Wafel, Ohio State. Booby Feaster. Luke Wafel is going to be out here. It feels like this is a trip to kind of cross the T's and dot the I's and not like try to convince himself why he committed in the first place. One to watch would be Jamian Winfield. Texas A&M is coming after him. But again, he's a kid that seems to be locked in. So there are a lot of guys down the stretch who could make like really surprising final decisions, but it just seems like these guys are pretty locked in and happy with USC. As long as Lincoln Riley stays there, and everybody knows those rumors, but it seems like he's kind of locked in as well.
Yeah, I think it just a completely different feel from a year ago. I mean, really, this entire cycle has been a different feel. Heading into the summer, heading into the fall, we never saw that collapse of USC recruiting, and a lot of it has to do with how they're winning on the football field. So USC fans, talk to Adam Gorney and I. How are you guys feeling about 2026? Do you think it's going to be a quiet signing day? Is there anybody out there that you want the Trojans to flip? Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk some Oregon recruiting. This weekend, Minnesota comes to town. Now, that should be a cakewalk, hopefully not a trap game for the Ducks, but we're talking recruiting because signing day is just 3 weeks away, and we're going to talk some flip targets down the stretch with national analyst Adam Gorney. But before we do that, Duck fans, do me a favor. These are exciting times. Hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. All right, let's bring in national analyst Adam Gorney, and I want to talk about 2 LSU flip targets first. DB Havon Finney, we know Oregon wants to add a defensive back in this class, and Finney, one of the best available, but also defensive lineman Deuce Geralds. Down in the South, Oregon would also like to add a defensive lineman. What do you think here with LSU without a coach?
Yeah, let's start with Finney. I've been told that if Corey Raymond stays on staff, on the new staff, that Finney will stick. Raymond is almost like a family friend to those guys. They're very close. And so I think that's going to be important. But not having a coach, and it seems like the coaching search is dragging on a little bit, and there aren't a clear names, and the Brian Kelly situation is difficult. I think Michigan would be the biggest target for Finney if he were to flip, but no visits are set. Nothing is happening yet. So I think Oregon probably is on the outside looking in there.
Right. And then you got Deuce Geralds, who is kind of lumped into this group. He's one of the defensive linemen that remains committed, but is there a chance Oregon could flip him?
Yeah, definitely a chance, and I think that they're going after him. They're going to make a run at him. He's very, very talented, kind of fits their scheme really well inside and is super versatile. But there are definitely family connections to LSU. There are family connections to Ole Miss. He basically grew up in Baton Rouge, so there's comfort there, and I think that's going to be important. So again, I think the coaching staff is going to play a big factor here. Oregon is going to take a shot. Others are going to definitely take a shot at him. My perception right now is that he stays somewhere in the Southeast.
Yeah, I know Ole Miss. I think his father played at Ole Miss, something like that. There are deep ties down there. All right. Now, we're going to talk about another flip target that it looks like Dan Lanning is now making a priority. He has one running back committed, but now he's turning his attention to LaMarcus Bell, who's committed to Utah. He was a one-time Oregon State commitment, already flipped that commitment to Utah. But now how much of a priority is Oregon making Bell?
Yeah, this is interesting because they offered him and then they're sort of slow playing the visit. So I'm wondering if they're going to get him on campus for the USC game and then really, put the pedal to the metal to work on the flip. I just want to have Oregon have Ball and Bell as their running backs in future years. I think that'll be great. That's the important thing here. But yes, he was committed to Oregon State. He's now committed to Utah. And when he went to Utah, they really rolled out the red carpet for him. They brought in former running backs to talk up, how they get the ball there, running behind it, obviously a huge offensive line, and how they're going to focus on that. But he's from there. He's from Oregon. He grew up an Oregon fan. It was his dream school. They come in with a late offer. So I think Oregon's sort of just biding their time to that final home game where they can get him in for USC and then really work on the flip. So I think down the stretch, more than likely that one happens.
All right. Yeah, you got LaMarcus Bam Bell. Don't forget his nickname is Bam. So there's a lot of alliteration there with Ball and Bam Bell, and it'd be a great running back room. All right, let's talk about a flip target that just won't go away. Caden Dixon-Wyatt, Mater Dei High School out there in California, committed to Ohio State early. There's always been rumors of Oregon. We've never completely put it away, and now here we are 3 weeks from signing day. Are the rumors legit? Should Oregon fans be watching Caden Dixon-Wyatt?
Yeah, the names I'm being called on the Ohio State board when I continue to report this, that Oregon is still very much in the picture, are pretty brutal. But yeah, I think this is totally about Brian Hartline. If he stays, Dixon-Wyatt and Chris Henry stay. If he goes, then it gets very, very interesting. I was told that Chris Henry was so connected to Brian Hartline that he was even flirting with the idea of visiting West Virginia last year if Brian Hartline got that job and following him there. So that relationship is super close. But I think Dixon White is the bigger threat to flip down the stretch. Oregon was always the school that was sort of mentioned first with him. Even like leading into his commitment, a lot of people thought Oregon was going to be the pick until like the final moments when he picked Ohio State. So Oregon has always been there. I think they love him in this class. And I think they're sort of playing this, don't be in Chris Henry's shadow at Ohio State. Be your own man, come to Oregon and be the next big time receiver here. So I think that's going to be appealing. But I do definitely believe that if Brian Hartline stays at Ohio State, he sticks with the Buckeyes.
Right. Do you think, we talk a lot on this show about programs maybe keeping somebody warm, hey, we got a running back looking around. We got this FIU running back that we're keeping warm. We might flip him if we need to. Is Caden Dixon Wyatt kind of keeping Oregon warm?
Yeah, that's what I think it is. And I think Oregon's perfectly happy being kept warm in this situation. They would take him at the final minute. I think that they're fine with that as long as they're still in the picture. And we all know Dan Lanning in those final weeks can be very, very compelling. Right. Obviously, there's going to be an NIL factor there, but it's also going to be just him, really showing the love in those final days, that final stretch. He's done this before where, he kind of cruises along in the final month and it looks like nothing's happening. And then, bam, he really hits it hard in those final days when it really counts. And gets in the head of these kids and gets a lot of them to flip.
All right. Now, let's talk about potential flips away from Oregon down the stretch. And they're shaping up to be two Miami-Oregon battles. There's always this underlying narrative anytime we do a Miami or Oregon video where the comment section, there's still some bad blood between Oregon and Mario Cristobal, or Miami fans and Oregon fans. So we got two big-time battles shaping up down the stretch. We got wide receiver Jalen Lott and edge Anthony Tank Jones. Miami's trying here. Do you think they have a shot at flipping either of them? Hey, football fans, whether you're cheering on South Carolina Gamecocks or the Texas A&M Aggies on Saturday, November 15th, make sure to drop by the Whataburger food truck during your tailgate. Get ready to bring home the W early with a hot, fresh Whataburger in hand. And no matter who comes out on top, when you take your team to Whataburger, you'll feel like a winner with food made fresh and hot every time, 24/7. We'll see you at the game. We'll see you at Whataburger.
Yeah, I think it's a long shot, but I think Miami, has the capability of doing this. Lott is interesting. His sister runs track at USC, so there's something there to watch. Miami continues to stay involved with him, so that's going to be interesting. And then, you have the Texas factor, but he never just really seemed to warm up to Texas. So, yes, I think this is an Oregon-Miami battle. I think Oregon is still in a decent spot. Tank Jones is a very interesting one because I was told by one SEC sort of GM that they were shocked that he was leaving the South, that their read on him was that he was going to stay close to home. His dad is a big Alabama fan. Auburn was super involved in this recruitment for a long time when Hugh Freeze was there. Now that's sort of slipped off since they're in a coaching search as well. But is staying home at Miami a feel of being closer to Alabama than going all the way to Oregon? On the flip side of that, I'm sure Jones has heard all of that talk. And sometimes kids kind of want to show that they can be independent and do their own thing and go that far away from home. We're also talking about a Tosh Lupoy factor here because he's been mentioned for the UCLA job. I don't think he's long as a defensive coordinator with head coaching jobs opening. So I think that's going to be played down the stretch as well. So I think that's definitely a much more interesting one because a lot of people that have been involved in his recruitment thought he was going to not leave the area. And now Miami is very involved in this and he's kind of reciprocated that interest. But then there's that pushback that, teenagers like to do and show that they can be their own person. And then Oregon stays a factor in that.
All right. Oregon fans, talk to Adam and I. Which side of the coin are you on when it comes to signing day? Will Oregon be the flipper or the flippy? Let us know. Comment section below. Thank you guys for watching the Inside Scoop. You can find us right here at the Rivals Recruit channel every Sunday and Wednesday. Rivals Recruits, your best source for all things recruiting. We will see you guys next time.